Kiki couldn't see, but her heart did. She felt the room, the tension, the whispers, and she saw her mother, with another man, in her father's bedroom. Every stroke of her brush told the truth her eyes could not see. Every woman wanted him, but the woman he married never believed she was enough. At events, a woman once stretched her hand toward Edward and said, "Good evening, sir." Without even glancing at Dora standing beside him, Edward didn't smile. "This is my wife," he said calmly, pulling Dora closer. "You greet me, you greet her." The woman laughed awkwardly. Edward did not. Edward was the kind of man people rarely meet, and never forget. Women whispered, "If that man is not my husband," one would laugh softly, "then let him at least be my destiny." Some were bolder, some lingered too close, some smiled at Edward and looked straight through Dora, as if she didn't exist. Dora saw everything. Some admired him in silence, some stared boldly, yet Edward never flinched. Feared God. He honored his vow. He loved his home. He corrected disrespect gently, but firm. He chose his wife publicly and privately every single time. Dora saw all of this, and still, she doubted. Not because Edward failed, but because Dora was at war with herself behind closed doors. When the house was quiet and mirrors became loud, Dora shrank. Her past whispered cruel things. Old choices rose like ghosts. She feared that one day Edward would see her the way she once saw herself, unworthy of the life she now lived. So she stayed silent. Edward loved her with patience that felt almost sacred. Not because he lacked strength, but because love, to him, was gentleness. He handled her like something precious, never rushed, never careless. After moments of closeness, he would always ask, "Are you okay?" And Dora would answer, "Yes." Even when her heart said, "I want more of you. I need more of you." She loved her husband. She admired him. She desired him. But desire, when mixed with insecurity, can become hunger, and hunger, when unanswered, can become dangerous. She wanted depth, time, presence. She wanted to feel chosen again and again. Edward's work demanded travel. His responsibilities pulled him away, not by choice, but by duty. His heart never left his home. Still, loneliness does not argue. It waits. Dora watched women desire her husband openly. She watched temptation circle him boldly, and survive untouched. And instead of feeling secure, she felt smaller. The room was quiet, too quiet. Dora sat at the edge of the bed, her fingers folded into each other like she was holding herself together. Edward stood by the window, loosening his cufflinks, his shoulders already carrying the weight of another journey. "I want another child," Dora said. Edward turned. "It's been 4 years, she continued, her voice steady but fragile. 4 years since Kiki came into our lives." She looked at him now, really looked at him. "You're never around," she said, softer. 2 weeks, sometimes more. You leave, you come back tired. How do we make a baby like this, Edward? How do we grow?" Silence filled the space between them. Edward exhaled slowly, ran a hand over his face, then walked toward her and knelt in front of her like a man before something sacred. "I'm sorry," he said. "You know I am." She nodded, but her eyes shimmered. "But work still takes you away," Dora whispered. "I know," he said, his voice breaking just enough to be human. "And I'm trying. I swear to you, I'm working on it." Dora searched his face for lies and found none. She believed him, she always did. When the suitcase was zipped shut, Edward walked down the hall on tiptoe. Kiki's room smelled like lavender and sleep. He bent slowly, pressing a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Daddy," she murmured without opening her eyes. "Yes, my angel." "Are you going again?" He smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Yes, but not for long." "Okay," she whispered. "Bye, Daddy." "Bye, precious," he said. "Daddy will see you soon." He lingered for a second longer, just to watch her breathe. That weekend, Dora took her daughter to her training session, the quiet hall where blind students learned their hobbies, guided by patience and sound. When they returned home, the compound was unusually still. She expected the gateman to rise and open the gate, but he was fast asleep. Dora used the remote, the metal groaning as it slid open. She remembered his complaint from the night before, fever, chills. He should have informed her if he was going to the hospital. For security, nothing more, she told herself as she walked toward his quarters and peeped inside. He was asleep. Sweat darkened his shirt, his breathing heavy with illness. And then her eyes caught it, an unmistakable outline beneath his trousers, bold, unhidden by fabric. Dora froze. Her mouth parted. She swallowed hard. She turned away immediately, heart pounding, heat crawling up her spine. Yet the image stayed. It followed her down the corridor, into the kitchen, into the silence of the afternoon. By evening, she stopped fighting the thought and let it wander where it wanted to go. She sent him a message. Sent money. Go to the hospital. Take care of yourself. Days later, after dropping her daughter at school, restraint finally gave way. Dora called him inside. She was already dressed to be noticed. Intentional, deliberate, dangerous. It felt as though he had been waiting for the invitation, or perhaps had read the hunger she had tried so hard to hide. Nothing resisted. Nothing slowed them down. Hours slipped past unnoticed. The house held their secret as daylight moved across the floor. When it was over, Dora lay still, breath unsteady, a satisfaction she hadn't felt in years settling into her bones. She was an hour late to pick up her child from school. Her pulse was still unsettled, her body heavy with a feeling she had never known since marriage. Even with Edward, who was deeper, kinder, more complete, this feeling had never existed. What haunted her now was not comparison, but shame. She wanted something rougher, longer, uncontrolled, and the realization sickened her. She had never lost time like this since she became a mother. Never. Even on her busiest days, Kiki was always first. Kiki stood by the gate, cane in hand. Though blind, she lifted her face the instant Dora drew near, like she could sense her mother's presence before a word was spoken. She carried Edward's face, his calm, his quiet strength. That resemblance pierced Dora deeper than any accusation could have. Shame washed over her. The gateman is sleeping with your mother, Dora thought, the words cutting her from the inside. Kiki tilted her head. Mummy, are you okay? Dora forced a smile that didn't reach her bones. Yes, baby. Everything is fine. But nothing was fine. The drive home was silent. Dora couldn't bring herself to look at the rearview mirror. When they arrived, she avoided the gateman's eyes completely. His presence felt loud now, contaminating. She felt low. Dirty. As though she had dragged mud into a home that had once been clean. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she called Edward. She spoke carefully, choosing words that would not tremble. She mentioned the gateman's illness, said he had been unwell for days. Suggested he should rest, at least a month. If he was interested, he could return later. Edward paused on the line. Okay, he said simply. There are no questions. No suspicion. Just trust. That trust burned her. After the call, Dora sent for the gateman. He came quickly, hope bright in his eyes, misreading everything. She didn't sit down. I want you to rest, she said firmly. You're strong, but you need to take care of yourself. Go to the hospital. Confusion crossed his face, then fear. He dropped to his knees. Madam, please. Don't send me away. I have nowhere to go. Dora looked at him and felt nothing but regret. You should have thought of that before, she told herself. Before you touched what was never yours. She handed him an envelope, thick, heavy. This is enough to start again, she said. But you must leave. And never come near my family again. He pleaded. His voice cracked. But her mind was made. He left. The gate closed behind him, and for the first time in days, Dora breathed. Her heart felt quieter. Heavier, but quieter. She sat alone and promised herself it would never happen again. She settled back into routine with Kiki, and for a while, peace returned. Quiet mornings, shared laughter, the comfort of knowing her child was safe in her arms. Dora clung to those ordinary days like a lifeline, telling herself that normalcy could erase what had already happened. Edward came home the following week. The house filled again, with his voice, his presence, the easy warmth he brought with him. For a full week, he chose nothing but family. They ate together, laughed together, watched Kiki dance around the living room as if joy itself lived in her feet. Edward looked lighter, grateful, as though leaving work behind had given him back something he didn't know he'd lost. But at night, Dora's mind betrayed her. Even in Edward's arms, even when he held her with the same patience and care, her thoughts wandered to a memory she wanted buried. The guilt came sharp and sudden, stealing her breath. She hated herself for it. Edward felt the distance. He paused one night, searching her face. Dora, what's wrong? Nothing, she said quickly. Too quickly. I'm fine. She forced a smile. She gave him what she thought he needed, attention, laughter, reassurance, anything to keep suspicion away. Edward accepted it, trusting as always, unaware that every kiss felt like a confession she couldn't bring herself to speak. Dora was drowning in silence. She had broken their vows, even if only once, and the weight of it pressed on her chest. Forgiving herself felt impossible. Edward wanted closeness. Togetherness. He had sacrificed so much for his family, and now he wanted to enjoy what remained. Unable to carry it alone, Dora reached out to Jessica. Her closest friend. Should I tell him? She typed. I just want peace of mind, Jessica replied almost immediately. Don't be stupid, the message read. If it were your husband, would it stop him from being close to you? Or would he tell you to your face? Let it go. Don't say anything. Dora stared at the screen for a long time. Silence, once again, felt like the safer choice. The next week, Jessica arrived at Dora's home, a sly smile tugging at her lips. She knew perfectly well that Edward had spent an entire week away, wrapping himself in work but leaving the house in Dora's care. Childhood friends, yes, but Jessica had never hidden her envy. She was still single, still burning with that quiet, simmering frustration that Dora had everything she desired. A devoted husband, a beautiful daughter, a life most women would kill for. You don't need to stoop so low and sleep with your gate man, Jessica said, leaning against the doorway. Her tone was sharp, yet coated with a thin veil of concern. There are men out there, men who can satisfy you better than you've ever imagined. You have the means, let your money do the talking. Dora's chest tightened. She wanted to resist, to remind Jessica that she had made her choice. But the words were planted seeds, and her mind wandered despite her stubborn denial. Jessica, please, not this time, she muttered, voice low, wary of where the conversation might lead. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica said, tilting her head, a conspiratorial glint in her eyes. I'm just trying to help. You need a man of your husband's caliber, so at least you feel less guilty about past mistakes. After that, you stop. Promise. Dora shook her head instantly, refusing to let the suggestion linger, refusing to admit the temptation crawling quietly beneath her skin. And yet, as Jessica's words faded, a whisper in the back of her mind nudged her, a thought she tried hard to silence. Maybe she's right. Jessica knew exactly what she was doing. She introduced Dora to one of her ex-boyfriends, Jack, casually calling him a friend. The call, she claimed, was a coincidence, but it wasn't. Jessica had dialed his number herself, waited for him to answer, then smiled and handed the phone to Dora. He just wants to say hi, she said lightly. Jessica knew Dora well. She knew Dora hated being rude, hated awkward refusals, hated disappointing people. And Jessica also knew something else. If there was one thing Jack did effortlessly, it was making a woman feel seen, desired, and momentarily detached from reality. Jack's voice came through the phone, calm, mature, responsible. He spoke to Dora with respect, with intention, with the kind of warmth that felt safe. Nothing rushed. Nothing improper. Just enough to sound sincere. So when Jessica later said, he'd really like to have your number, Dora didn't hesitate. Jessica exchanged their numbers herself, smiling as she did. Jack's number saved into Dora's phone, Dora's number sent to Jack, like it was nothing more than a harmless favor. But it was never harmless. Jessica left Dora's house satisfied, certain she had planted exactly what she came for. Almost immediately, Jack's presence began to feel like a miracle. His messages were gentle, thoughtful, never rushed, never demanding. He listened. He affirmed. He spoke in a way that made Dora feel seen, understood, even guided. Slowly, she began to see him as God sent, a man brought into her life at the exact moment she needed help finding her balance again. Jack reminded her of who she was before guilt swallowed her days. He encouraged her to reconnect with her husband emotionally, to forgive herself, to focus on motherhood with a lighter heart. With him around, life felt easier. Dora was grateful, grateful to God, grateful to Jessica, grateful for the strange peace Jack seemed to bring. They grew close. Too close. They attended business meetings together, moved in the same circles, shared long conversations that stretched into evenings. Dora began to see him as someone reliable, someone who could step in when Edward was away on projects or traveling for work. A helper. A friend. A support system. What Dora didn't see was the patience behind Jack's kindness. He was digging carefully, slowly, measuring every step, waiting for the ground beneath her to soften. Then the lines shifted. A touch that lingered too long. A peck that stayed an extra second. A look that held meaning it shouldn't. And then came the night Jack convinced her to stay over. Just for the night. Dora called her sister to pick Kiki up from school, her voice shaking as she gave the excuse. That evening, Jack had her entirely to himself. He remained gentle, almost innocent, as though nothing dangerous was happening at all. But he knew that by morning, Dora fled his house in shame, her heart pounding, her mind screaming that she had crossed a line she swore never to approach again. She didn't know that as she left, Jessica stepped out from another room, laughing softly. "Baddest," Jessica said, clapping for Jack. "I knew she wouldn't survive your temptation." Jack smiled. He had succeeded. Almost immediately, Dora's message came through. "I'm so sorry for what happened last night. Please, let's move on like nothing ever happened." They read it together and burst into laughter. "No worry," Jessica said between laughs. "And a she go call again. Last one. Last one go turn first one." "Oh yeah," Jack replied, pulling Jessica closer. "Come to daddy." "You kept me waiting all night," Jessica teased. They collapsed together in the living room, clothes scattered across different corners, the house quiet again by morning. Later that night, Jack sent Dora an apology, carefully worded, gentle, convincing. Another calculated move. Dora read it, her heart softening. "It's okay," she replied. "Let's just see it as if nothing happened." And once again, she fell for the care, the attention, and the illusion. A few days later, Jessica invited Dora to a party. Another smile, another casual tone, but this time, the plan didn't move the way she expected. "Edward was home. We'll go together," he said, already reaching for his jacket. At the party, the music was loud, the laughter careless, the energy off. Edward's jaw tightened almost immediately. He leaned close to Dora, his voice low and firm. "We shouldn't be here. My family shouldn't be seen in places like this." Dora didn't argue. She nodded, and they left. On the drive home, Edward finally spoke. He warned her about Jessica, about her lifestyle, her refusal to grow, the way she dragged chaos wherever she went. "She doesn't look decent," he said quietly. "And after all these years, she still doesn't want to change. Please, stay away from her." Dora listened. She really did. But Jessica didn't disappear. She kept showing up, messages, calls, unplanned visits. And Jack played his game with patience and charm. He spoke softly, carefully, always as if he were protecting Dora from something. Jessica's whispers filled the gaps, how Jack had been abandoned by his ex-wife, how he had suffered, how he had finally found peace with Dora but was afraid to say it. The lies came dressed as sympathy. Dora fell. She began seeing Jack in secret, telling herself it was harmless, that it meant nothing. She didn't know that every meeting, every moment of closeness, was being recorded, stored away, waiting to be used. With Jack, she said things she had never allowed herself to think out loud. She told him how he made her feel alive. How safe. How seen. One night, her voice cracked as she confessed she wished she had met him before her husband. Jack listened. Always listening. One evening, he dropped her off at home. Dora hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Come inside," she said. Jack paused. "I thought Kiki would be home." "Don't worry," Dora replied quickly. "You're safe." He followed at the entrance. He lifted her slightly, pressing her back against the wall, his hands roaming with familiarity that no longer felt accidental. Dora's breath caught as they moved deeper inside. Then, "Mummy?" Kiki's small voice floated from the parlor, right in the middle of her reading session. Dora froze. She raised a finger sharply to Jack's lips, her eyes wide with panic. He went silent instantly. "Who's that, Mum?" Kiki asked again. Dora forced calm into her voice, swallowing the fear rising in her throat. "Just me with my phone, baby," she said gently. "How are you today, my angel?" The house fell quiet and the weight of what she was risking finally settled in her chest. "Mum needs to freshen up from a rough day," Dora said, forcing a calm smile into her voice. "I'll come join you soon, baby." Kiki nodded. She trusted tones more than faces. Jack moved carefully, quiet feet, measured breath, as he followed Dora up the stairs into her matrimonial room. The door closed. The world outside fell away. Inside, time loosened its grip. When it was over, they lay still, lungs burning, the silence loud. Jack reached for the duvet, then the door swung open. Shock snapped through the room like broken glass. Dora and Jack froze, mouths open, hands scrambling to cover what shouldn't be seen. Dora swallowed hard. I'm trying to meditate," she said too quickly. "Okay. I'll join you in the reading room shortly." Kiki stood there, head lowered. Ties gathered, unannounced. She turned away without another word, counting her steps with the tap of her stick. In her room, she opened her painting book. Colors found the page. Shapes formed, not from sight, but from feeling. She painted what her spirit had sensed, even though her eyes could not see it. Minutes later, Dora stepped out, scanning the house, fear pressing on her chest. She signaled silently. Jack moved toward the stairs. "Mum, is that Daddy?" Kiki's voice floated out. Everything stopped. "No, my love," Dora answered, her voice shaking. "Then who is at the stairs, standing still?" Kiki asked. "At the stairs?" Dora echoed. "Maybe it's the delivery guy. I asked for some medication. I'll go and check." She opened the door. Jack slipped out and into his car. Dora opened the gate from her end. From her window, Kiki listened. Sound was her sight. Energy told her more than eyes ever could. She hid the drawing board deep inside her wardrobe and lay down. Disappointment pressed quietly on her chest, not fully understood, but deeply felt. The house went still again. And the lie stayed awake. Kiki always heard sound before it arrived. Footsteps carried weight to her long before they reached her door. Breath shifted the air before it became a voice. That night, Dora came quietly into Kiki's room. The child was already asleep, her chest rising in soft, steady rhythm. Dora stood there longer than necessary, watching, then bent, kissed her forehead, pulled the blanket higher, and switched the light to a cool glow. A mother's hands. A mother's silence. Morning broke with the sound of keys. Edward was home. Dora became brightness itself. She smiled the way she used to, the way that made rooms feel lighter. She ran to him, arms around his neck, laughter easy. Nothing in her face admitted guilt. Nothing in her voice hinted at fracture. Somewhere along the way, she had learned how to divide herself, and call it survival. Edward held her, grateful. A faithful man who loved the simple miracle of being home. He knelt, and Kiki came forward, resting against his shoulder like she had been waiting all night for that exact place. "I love you, baby," Edward said. "Love you too, Daddy," Kiki answered. He lifted her, carried her upstairs. The house filled with laughter. They played. They joked. For a moment, the world looked whole, and the lie lived easily among them. Days passed. The secret moved like a shadow that learned the shape of the room. Then one afternoon, Dora went to Jack's house without announcing herself. The door opened to disorder. Clothes where they shouldn't be. Shoes kicked aside. Her breath caught, not yet fear, just confusion. Then she saw it. Something small, unmistakable, intimate in a way that didn't belong to her. Voices drifted from the bedroom. Close. Familiar. Wrong. She stepped forward and pushed the door open. Jessica was there, on top of Jack, unbothered, unashamed, as if Dora were an interruption instead of a revelation. "So," Jessica said lightly, "you spoiled the show." Jack stood, calm, almost amused, reaching for his clothes like this was all expected. He walked toward Dora with a confidence that felt rehearsed. Her hand moved before her mind could catch up. The slap landed clean. For a moment, Jack's face hardened. His hand twitched, then stopped. Control returned like a mask sliding back into place. Dora stood there shaking, the room spinning, the truth finally loud enough to hurt. Dora's second hand rose, anger shaking through her fingers. Jack caught it midair. "You want collect," he snapped, his voice suddenly sharp, unfamiliar. "They tell you say I be Omo Ajibo? You know day fear face." Before she could pull away, he shoved her hard. Dora crashed into the couch, her head striking the wooden armrest. Pain exploded behind her eyes. The room spun. Jessica walked in then, slow, deliberate, slipping her arm around Jack's neck like a trophy she had already claimed. "I for W and knack your husband before," Jessica said casually, her lips curling. "At least once. But see as matter don't boast like this." She laughed softly, cruelly. "You go pay my money." Dora tried to speak, but nothing came out. "I hate say you get everything," Jessica continued, her voice rising. "You we God don't do well. Wetting you day find outside? You think say we day street and a play our life be?" She leaned closer. "You day sleep with your gateman." Dora's body trembled. "Anyways," Jessica went on, unfazed, "I wanted your husband. I promise say I go drop all the street runs. I go show him your tapes, how you day sleep around, even carry man enter your matrimonial house." Jack said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence was agreement. "I W and console him," Jessica finished. "Make you feel me at least once. Omo, my life for done better." Dora realized then she was on the floor. Her wrists were bound. The room felt smaller, closing in. "So now," Jessica said, crouching to Dora's level, "you go send all the money. Your account. Your business account. Your husband's joint account." Dora opened her mouth to beg. Jack cut her off. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. One transfer. Then another. The numbers climbed until they stopped meaning anything. She called the account manager, her voice breaking as she requested access, larger limits, immediate clearance. When the last alert confirmed, Jack stepped forward. The blow came fast. The world went dark before she hit the floor. The money Dora sent disappeared the moment it landed. It went into an account that didn't belong to anyone who could be found. Numbers without a face, a trail designed to die quietly. Within hours, Jack and Jessica changed locations. Her phone was smashed and discarded. Pieces scattered like evidence meant never to be whole again. Dora was moved to a new building. Empty. Cold. Anonymous. That was where they made the call. Edward heard the demand and felt the world tilt. He didn't ask questions. He didn't negotiate. By the time he realized the joint account was already empty, the ransom was already leaving his hands. Take everything. Just let her breathe, he paid. And still, she didn't come home. Edward sat alone after the call ended, staring at nothing. Every ambition he had ever carried collapsed into a single prayer: let her be alive. He called the police immediately, his voice steady only because breaking would not help. They worked fast. They traced her line. The last person she called was her husband. There were no recent calls to Jack, only messages, mostly on WhatsApp. Clean. Intentional, too clean. They followed the money, but the account was gone. Closed. Wiped. Like it had never existed. Who does she keep close? The police asked. Edward swallowed. She doesn't keep friends. Only one. Jessica. Kiki began asking for her mother that same night. Daddy, where is Mummy? At first, Edward answered softly. Then less confidently. Then not at all. Kiki cried until her small body shook, until worry made her sick. Edward held her through the night, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Jessica was invited in. She cried on cue. Wiped her eyes. Spoke between sobs. The last time I saw her was the party, she said. She left early. Her husband was there. Her performance was flawless. Who is Jack? The officer asked, glancing at Dora's contact list. A friend, Jessica replied quickly. A family friend. Jack was called in next. Calm. Polite. Cooperative. He said the right things. Told the wrong truth beautifully. Then other contacts were questioned. People from business seminars Dora had attended. They described a man who looked like Jack. A man who had been with her. Jack never mentioned business. Never mentioned meetings. The room went quiet. Too many loose threads. One face appearing too often. The truth was circling, and somewhere far away, Dora was still not home. 2 weeks passed and no calls. No demands. No proof of life. The silence was louder than any threat. Edward woke each day not knowing if his wife was breathing somewhere, or already gone. The house stayed full of people, yet felt hollow. Questions hung in the air with no answers to land on. Suppose pressure Jessica well. Dora's mother cried out suddenly, her voice cracking the room open. That girl is not to be trusted. I warned my daughter since they were small. She wiped her face angrily, pain pouring out with every word. Which kind party should I invite my daughter to? She cried again, shaking her head. Which party? Before anyone could answer, a small voice came from down the hallway. Daddy. Everyone froze. Silence swallowed the room. Edward moved instantly, his heart racing ahead of his feet. He entered Kiki's room and knelt in front of her, forcing calm into his face. Baby, I'm so sorry, he said softly, his voice trembling despite his effort. Mummy will come back soon, okay? Daddy is doing his best. Daddy is praying. Kiki listened, her head tilted slightly, as if weighing his words. Then she stood up suddenly and walked to her wardrobe. Edward watched, confused, as she reached inside and pulled out her painting board. She placed it carefully into his hands. Daddy, she said gently, take this. Maybe it will help us find Mummy. Edward smiled through the ache, flipping through the pages. Bright colors. Joyful shapes. A child's world. His smile grew, until it stopped. There it was, Dora and a man, both frozen in shock, bodies hidden beneath a duvet, fear painted into their faces. The image was crude, innocent, and devastating all at once. Edward's chest collapsed inward. Tears spilled before he could stop them, not only for the betrayal, but because his blind child had seen this. Witnessed it. Carried it. Knock sounded at the door. Dora's mother entered. Edward tried to hide the board. Tried to wipe his face. Too late. She saw it. She took the board from his hands slowly, stared at the image, and then dropped to her knees. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, my daughter." She wept openly, pleading aloud, for forgiveness, for mercy, for the evil she now understood had entered her child's home. Edward broke down completely, crying like a man whose strength had finally run out. Yet even then, he tried to shield the truth from the others in the house, holding the pain close, carrying the weight alone. Because loving Dora had always meant protecting her. Even now, Edward wiped his face, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted the child's painting to his phone. Every brushstroke, every color, screamed the reality he had feared. The young man's face, Jack, stared back at him through the paper. Edward didn't hesitate. With urgency pounding in his chest, he raced to the police station, the city blurring past in streaks of gray. Inside, he handed the image to the inspector. Recognition flashed immediately. Jack. The man had tried to vanish, leaving nothing but a discarded phone behind. No contacts. No trace. But Edward's determination, and the connections he had cultivated over years, turned the tide. Within hours, Jack's face appeared on every wanted notice. Airports, borders, travel checkpoints. He was trapped by the law before he could escape. Meanwhile, deep in a forest so thick it swallowed the light, Dora sat bound to a chair in a cold underground chamber. The damp air pressed against her skin, the faint echo of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Jessica had left her there once before, but now, alone, Dora's survival instincts ignited. Her body shook as she strained against the ropes, her mouth gagged, but she refused to surrender to despair. The chair groaned under her weight as she rocked it violently, desperation lending her strength. With a final, shuddering push, the wooden legs splintered under her. Pain shot up her arms, her fingers scraping raw against jagged wood, but she clawed free, hand by hand, leg by leg, until the ropes loosened enough to let her slip out. Collapsing to the ground, her breath ragged, Dora crawled to the stairway, each step a battle against exhaustion. Finally, she emerged into the sunlight that pierced through the canopy above the forest. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the warmth hit her face, and the scent of freedom filled her lungs. She didn't look back. Jack was somewhere behind her, unaware she had survived. In the distance, the roar of a car engine interrupted the quiet. Jack had noticed movement, the faint crunch of leaves under hurried feet. Panic surged through him, but Dora ran faster, guided by instinct and sheer will. Every step carried her closer to help, further from captivity. She sprinted toward the nearest roof structure she could see, determination burning through every exhausted fiber of her. But Jack's shadow moved frantically through the forest as he realized his prey was slipping away. The underground, the ropes, the shattered chair, they were nothing now. Dora had reclaimed her life, and nothing in the darkness could stop her. Dora ran with every ounce of strength left in her body, heart hammering, lungs burning. Behind her, Jack's shadow lunged closer. She glanced back, a gun in his hand, an instinct screamed terror. She pushed herself harder, desperate to reach the houses ahead, to reach safety. Then came the shot. Pain exploded in her leg, and she crumpled to the ground. Jack ran to her, dragging her across the rough earth. Her body and face scraped the soil, the forest echoing with the violence of the moment. She screamed silently through the gag, her tears streaking the dirt on her cheek. A young boy perched in a tree nearby froze. The gunshot had pierced the quiet evening. He saw the man dragging her and sensed the danger immediately. Terrified but determined, he ran toward his parents. Jessica's car screeched into view. Her voice cracked in panic. "We need to leave, now." Jack didn't hesitate. He pulled Dora into the underground chamber, ensuring she was hidden. Another gunshot rang out, muffled but deadly. Seconds later, both Jack and Jessica disappeared into the night in separate vehicles, unaware of the boy watching, tracing their movements with wide eyes. The boy stayed back just long enough to hear another shot echo through the bush. Then, trembling, he sprinted to fetch his parents. Together, they followed the faint traces, scratches in the earth, blood drops, crushed leaves, until they reached the underground hideout. There, Dora lay motionless. His father rushed to her, checking desperately for a pulse. His mother called for help, gathering villagers as witnesses. Together, they carefully lifted her and transported her to the nearest police station, hearts heavy, prayers whispered for survival, hope mingled with terror. When the police arrived at the hospital, they moved quickly. They checked Dora's breathing, confirmed she was alive, and documented every injury with precision. Statements were taken, evidence collected. Within hours, The report reached the village police headquarters and was immediately forwarded to the city. Photos were circulated. There was no doubt, it was Dora. Edward and the family drove quietly to the scene, fear sitting heavily in the car. No one spoke. From there, Dora was transferred to a better hospital, their private hospital, where specialists were already waiting. Emergency treatment began at once. Surgery followed. She survived, but the bullet had struck a delicate part of her leg bone. The damage was beyond repair. To save her life, the doctors made the hardest decision. Her leg had to be amputated. Edward felt everything at once: relief, pain, gratitude, heartbreak, but above all, joy. His wife was alive. Nothing else mattered. He stayed by her side, holding her hand, choosing silence over questions, love over judgment. When Kiki visited her mother for the first time, the hospital room changed. The child ran to her, wrapping her arms around Dora. Mother and daughter clung to each other, crying without words. Dora still hadn't spoken. Not once. Tears spoke for her, endless, heavy tears. Edward, her mother, and her siblings surrounded her, consoling her, protecting her, letting her grieve without pressure. After a month in the hospital, Dora finally came home. Edward never asked how it happened. He never mentioned the painting. Never spoke of the image. He cared for her completely, physically, emotionally, until she was whole in every way except what had been taken from her months past. Then one day, 3 images appeared in Edward's email. He opened them. Sex tape, nude picture of Dora. The message followed, demanding ransom. If he refused, the images would be released to the world. Edward didn't panic. He went straight to the police. They instructed him carefully, what to say, how to respond, how to delay, so they could trace the sender. Edward followed every instruction exactly. The location pinged. Jack and Jessica were found together, in the same spot. They were arrested at last. The silence that had haunted the family began to break, not with shame, but with justice. Justice did not come loudly. It came quietly, with truth. When Jack and Jessica finally spoke, there was no drama left in them. No bravado. No lies. They told the police everything, how they planned it, how they moved the money, how they abandoned Dora in the bush, convinced she would die there and take their secret with her. They were judged without mercy. The court was firm. Clear. Final. They were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives in prison. No appeal, no escape, no second chance. Edward was later refunded the money used during the operation to track them down. But money meant nothing anymore. What mattered was that justice had been served, fully and finally. Dora's mother cried, not tears of pain this time, but of relief. I knew it, she kept saying. I knew Jessica would destroy my daughter. Her heart rested knowing the woman she had warned against since childhood could never hurt Dora again. And then, Dora spoke. For the first time since everything happened, she found her voice. She sat across from Edward, her body changed, her spirit broken, her eyes full of shame. Her voice shook as she told him everything, the lies, the manipulation, the weakness, the moment she chose silence instead of truth. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, tears streaming. Because I don't forgive myself. Edward listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shout. He didn't walk away. Dora's voice broke completely when she spoke about Kiki. When I saw the painting, when I realized my own child saw me like that, she couldn't finish the sentence. Even though that painting later saved her life, Dora said it was the deepest wound she would ever carry. I failed her, she whispered. A child should never carry a burden like that. Edward wept with her, not in anger, but in grief. Grief for what was lost. Grief for what could never be undone. Healing would not be instant. Forgiveness would not be simple. Some scars would never fade. But the lies were finally over. The truth was finally spoken. And for the first time since everything began, the family stood in the light. Not whole, but honest. And sometimes, honesty is the beginning of redemption. Please like, subscribe, and stay connected for family content that restores broken hearts and strengthens homes. Healing begins when stories are shared. Tell us what this meant to you. We truly love hearing from you.